reminding us to place
Principles before personalities.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Cool. Last week we did step 12. I believe we made it through the entirety of the chapter, which has not happened in at least a year, I think. So congratulations if you was here for that. You might not ever see it again. That would put us this week on step 1 or something in between. I never quite figured out what I wanted to do, so we're probably just going to start at the beginning of the book. Close your book. Open that. Turn the page.
This is awesome. We're synced up with Lemire now.
and Friday night.
You should find the title
The Holy
page
Trilogy.
about 2 pages in. Title page, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. We have recovered highlighted. We like to point out that recovered is mentioned roughly 23 times throughout the big book. I think that's the word recover, with the majority of them being recovered. Anyway, the title page here, Alcoholics Anonymous, as you can tell, this is the founding text for our society. It's where the fellowship gets its name. It's not the other way around. We didn't name the book after the fellowship. The fellowship didn't have a name when the book was released. So when the book came out and it started being circulated, from what I hear, which I didn't know that there was dispute in this, but my last trip up to Akron, it was pointed out to me that there was a little bit of dispute, but most people agree that the first group to take the name Alcoholics Anonymous from the book and call their meeting a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was the Cleveland meeting, which was Clarence Snyder, sponsee of Dr. Bob. He was also one of the youngest members, if not the youngest member, to get sober at that time. And they were having issues with some varieties of religious denominations in their group. And they were having people who were agnostic and this kind of thing. And I think more specifically, the Catholic Church was having issues with alcoholics, with our group, our fellowship at the time, because it was not Catholic Church sanctioned. And we had a Bible in the meeting. And so there was a little bit of dispute, a little controversy. Either way, Clarence Snyder wrote a letter to Dr. Bob and said, hey, we're going to start our own meeting down here in Cleveland, and we're going to take the good book off the table and put the big book, which was freshly printed, newly released, and put that on the table. And we're going to call our meeting after the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that would be the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, some people say that there was a meeting in Akron that did the same thing. But like I said, as far as I've heard, from what I've been able to look into, the majority of people follow the Clarence Snyder route. Important, not important. I guess I'll leave that up to you. Table of contents, next page. Now, this is the basic text for our society. Being a basic text is to be studied, and it's set up in a way so that we can learn about what Alcoholics Anonymous is, more specifically what the program is, what we have to do to get to a place where we have recovered, like the first 100 who wrote the book recovered. It's broken down. You see the forward to the first, second, third, fourth edition. Those are just forwards, if you're familiar with what a forward to a book is. The one that we usually focus on is the forward to the first edition. We read it at the beginning of every meeting. And then the forward to the second edition. The second edition was released in 1955, around the same time as a little book called AA Comes of Age. And it's kind of like I like to think of it as an abridged version of that book, where it goes over the infant stage of our fellowship. Talks a lot about the beginnings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Talks about the Oxford group. Talk about some of the principles of the Oxford group. Talks about Dr. Silkworth and what our earlier recovery numbers were and all that good stuff. So if you're interested in that, read the forward to the second edition. The third and fourth, we will have a fifth edition coming out soon. The doctor's opinion. Okay, so in the first edition of the big book, the doctor's opinion was chapter 1, page 1. The doctor's opinion was written by Dr. Silkworth, and he was he is the one who introduced Bill to the concept of alcoholism as an allergy, and later worked with Bill and another woman I can never remember. Marty Mann. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Marty Mann, Silkworth, and Bill worked together with William Silkworth to talk to the American Medical Association and help in 1955 get out the disease of alcoholism qualified as a disease. So over time, Silkworth kind of took the definition, remained the same, but moved from the term allergy to the term disease. And they worked to push that. That wasn't something the American Medical Association came with on their own. That's something that they did push for. Now, all that's in the doctor's opinion. Why is he no longer chapter 1, page 1? For the most part, because he's not an alcoholic. And so all the numbered pages outside of the Roman numerals will be from the perspective of someone who's an alcoholic. And so you can open up to page 1, chapter 1 today, and you'll find Bill's story. And it opens up the same way we start carrying the message to another alcoholic, and that is by sharing our own personal experience with that person. And that's what the same thing that the book does for us. So that's chapter 1, Bill's story. From Bill's story, from the doctor's opinion all the way down to chapter 4, we agnostics, it's primarily focused on steps 1 and 2. I forget how many pages it is, like 28 or
something like that.
It's 50 something.
Yeah, we agnostic starts at 44.
Right. So however many, it's
57 pages.
It's 57 pages plus the doctor's opinion. So it's over 60 pages long that we spend solely on steps 1 and 2. Now, if you hold up the entirety of the working of steps 1 to 11, it takes up this much of the book, right? Everybody see that? The rest of the book is made up of, working with others, vision for you, to the employer, chapter to the wives, that kind of stuff. But the program steps 1 through 11 are in these pages right here, 0 to 88. 60 of that 0 to 88, 60 of those pages are on step 1 and 2 alone, which leaves 28 pages for steps 3 through 11. Yeah, okay. One of the things that you'll notice in the chapter that we went over last week, in the chapter Working with Others, is that the majority of that chapter is focused on steps 1 and 2. It's about sharing my personal experience with another alcoholic and helping qualify that alcoholic as such, as an alcoholic, helping him come to the realization, him or her come to the realization that they're alcoholic, what that means, what that looks like, and then getting them curious about the solution, and then laying out what the solution looks like in a general way, including what we mean when we say God, and when we refer to this higher power as the pinnacle of the principles in the absolute form, which is directly from the Oxford group that had the 4 absolutes. So, next, we go into chapter 5. Chapter 5 it covers steps 3 and 4. Chapter 6, Into Action, covers steps 5 through 11, and then, of course, chapter 7 covers all of step 12. So that's the table of contents for you. I like to make little annotations like that. If you want to, you can. If we go to the preface on page XI, that middle paragraph is what we like to look at. Somebody read that middle paragraph on page XI.
Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor.
Thank you. So there it just reinforces for us saying that this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped a large number of men and women to recovery. We're strongly against any radical changes to the first 164 pages. That's just as true today. Like I said, they're coming out with the 5th edition soon-ish. I think they're just going through the personal stories in the back, and they're going to update those, and that's what they're going through at the current moment. Depending on their progress with that, it should be out within a year or two, the 5th edition. But when that 5th edition comes out, you're not going to have to throw out your 4th edition unless you want to get a 5th edition. The first 164 pages are going to be exactly the same. There was a push to change some of the language in the big book for the 5th edition, and that was thrown out, and they were given a side project called the Plain Language Big Book, which is I just got an email earlier this week saying that they are coming out with the 2nd edition of the Plain Language Big Book, where they've made some changes based on feedback from the fellowships. But the 5th edition of the Big Book will look exactly the same, except for it will have an additional forward, being the 4th to 5th edition, and then it will have new stories, but they almost always keep the first 2 sections of the stories, which would be the pioneers and something else, like the first 100 or so. Let's see here. Next page. Forward to the 1st edition. This is the original preamble. It's what we read at the beginning of every meeting. We have Alcoholics Anonymous, blah, 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 so on and so forth. The main thing I want to draw our attention to is that it says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Precisely how we recovered, that is the main purpose of this book. That's what it's attempting to do, and that's what we try to do in this meeting. If you remember, we also read from the pamphlet entitled Excerpts from Problems in Alcohol, where it says that the teaching and practice of 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. That's also the sole purpose of the book. Makes sense why the sole purpose of an AA group is the exact same thing as the book, because it's what our fellowship is founded on. Let's go to page 29. On the bottom of 28, it says, in the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostics. So if you turn the page, the chapter 3 is more about alcoholism, and if you go to page 44, chapter 4 is we agnostics. Many who were once in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, this is back on 29, by the way, we find such convictions no great obstacle for a spiritual experience. Further on, that means past 3 and 4, which begin in chapter 5, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. So it's telling us that starting from chapter 5 onward, we should be able to find clear-cut directions showing how the first 100 recovered. If we go back a little bit to 19, just a couple more things I want to point out here. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume. Somebody read from that on page 19 to the top of 20.
We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This suggests a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that the real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and the respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help with their needs. You may already have asked yourself, why is it that all of us became so very ill from drinking? Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking yourself, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them.
Thank you. Cool. So he's telling us that it is a purpose to answer such questions specifically in this book. How to recover from a hopeless condition of mind and body. At the bottom of 19, you can see that when they first wrote the book, for those of you who don't know, Bill wrote the book. I think that most people are aware of that Bill Wilson penned the literature. He also penned a number of other literature that's passed around the fellowship. The textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous is a little different. He wrote the chapters in sections and then sent them out to the fellowship. And then he would have those chapters passed around at groups, read aloud at groups, and then they would receive feedback from the members at the time. And they would take that little rough draft of that chapter, and the chairperson would take feedback from the group, and he would underline, highlight, write in the margins, cross certain sections out, and they would go through paragraph by paragraph and basically have a big book study on a book that hadn't been fully written. And then they would take all that correction or feedback or whatever that they had written into those chapters that were circulated, and they would send it back to Bill. And then Bill would review that and make adjustments as necessary to help bring in the greater consciousness of the first 100, so that the book that we ended up with in the first edition and consecutive editions, seeing as how the first 164 has been left largely untouched, the book that we ended up with isn't just a book that Bill Wilson wrote, though it was penned by Bill, and you could say he was the chair of the writing of the book. He alone did not edit it and put it in the way that only he saw fit. It is a collaborative, collective outcome or of the original 100 members who first recovered from alcoholism. And
so there's one other book like this. Just one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that book it's like 66 books written by 40 different people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other books like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way it's put together. I think if you look at the diversity within the first 100 people who recovered, it really wasn't that great. It was kind of limited, but that was based on just the people involved. As the fellowship has grown throughout the years, coming up on 90, closing in late 80s, 90 years, the fellowship has been around. The big book has reached out to every country, every language, every nationality, every race, every religion, every faith, sect. Though we aren't aligned with any of these race, creeds, sects, denominations, we blend naturally with every alcoholic so long as they qualify as an alcoholic. So there is no room for controversy, and that's kind of what he's telling us about on the bottom of 19 and the top of 20. He's saying, you know, we most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints, and the respect for their opinions or attitudes, which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. With that thought in mind, just like he said in the beginning of it, he said, of necessity, there will be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. But these things are all, even though by their nature are controversial, like it says at the top of 20, this is about how we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. And if you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking yourself, what do I have to do? And that's the purpose of this book. And so it covers the subjects it needed to cover to achieve the outcome of victory over alcoholism. Sobriety for life. And not just sobriety, abstinence, but sobriety with quality of life following the abstinence. And that's the goal of the book, that's the goal of the literature, and that's kind of the goal of what we're working towards here. Anybody else got anything on that? We'll go into the doctor's opinion. I left myself 15 minutes to cover the allergy. That's plenty of time, I think. Let's go to page XXV. Doctor's opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcohol and drug addiction gave Alcoholics Anonymous a letter. Again, I already mentioned it, but this is talking about William D. Silkworth. He worked at Towns Hospital, nationally renowned hospital at the time. From 1932 to 1951, he worked with over 40,000 alcoholics and addicts during his tenure there at Towns Hospital. And while he was working there, he came across he picked up that there's a certain type of person who was distinct and set apart from the rest of the people who came through there. And those are the people he deemed alcoholic. When these people came through, he would kind of run the gambit on them. And by doing so, he'd do this, just like they do today. And when you go to treatment or a detox center, they sit you down in front of a doctor. Doctor tells you that you're dying from your drug or alcohol abuse. Tell you if you don't stop, you're going to die, or your liver is going to fail. You'll need organ transplants. Your family's going to leave you. They might even bring your family in to sit and cry and beg you to stop. Have a little intervention right on the spot like that. They then run a certain series of treatment tests, and then maybe do a little bit of psychological evaluation. And then once you're good and detoxed and you got a little bit of time on the other side, they send you out on your way and hope that you stay sober. Silkworth noticed the same thing anybody who works in treatment facilities today notice. Some people don't come back. Some people come back frequently, and often in a worse place than when they left initially. These are the people that caught Dr. Silkworth's eye. And one of these people happened to be Bill. And he'd also came across some literature. I read an article that it was actually a man out of Germany that had first proposed this idea that an alcoholic has an allergy to alcohol. And that's going to be the first part that we discuss. One thing to keep in mind, especially if you've been through treatment recently, is that they might not refer to it as an allergy today, like we're about to cover it. But the definition for why they refer to it as an allergy, as an abnormal reaction, and that our body reacts differently than the normal individual, that definition has remained the same. So even though it's moved from allergy to disease, and disease to something else, remember, the definition remains the same. How our body reacts after putting a drink in us, phenomenon craving like we're about to cover, that in itself has not changed as the time has passed.
Yeah, and the other thing that hasn't changed, like Ron said before, is that we see it in treatment centers today. I worked in treatment for a while, and for the majority of people that went to Towns Hospital, so say out of this 40,000, we'll just say 35,000 of them came. Maybe they even had to come back, 2 or 3 times, but at some point in the course of their repeated treatment, they went, they left, and they never came back, and they stayed sober, and they were able to stay sober maybe as a result of some of the therapies and psychological treatments and things like that. And that's the same thing in treatment today. There's anybody who's been to treatment knows that there's a majority of people that go to treatment that treatment works for, and that they don't need AA or NA or anything else like that, that the treatment works. And so we got to be careful not to classify everybody that drinks or uses drugs into this smaller, more selective class that Silkworth was talking about. So out of that 40,000, let's say 5,000 of them, let's say 1,000 of them came back over and over and over and over again. Those are the people he was interested in. And it's the same thing today in treatment. There is a small subset of drinkers and drug users who qualify as what we'll call the real drug addict, the real alcoholic, to which treatment has no lasting effect for permanent sobriety. And so it was the case back in 1935, and it's the case in 2025. Nothing's changed. And that's the class he's talking about.
And it goes along, like just personally, for my family, like my wife, she has to take pain medicine to manage her pain because her whole back is a mess. Now she has a sister that is an addict, she has a brother that is an addict, They have the mental obsession, the physical allergy. They are legitimate addicts. So she is scared to death to cross that path and to become one of us. She's seen it in action. She knows what kind of damage it does. She doesn't want to be one of us in a sense. So both her doctor and I put it across that there is 2 different types of the addiction with it. Is that that there is the real addict or alcoholic, and then there is the real hard drinker, or there is the person who's been physically addicted from the use of the medicine that they have not been able to succumb to actually regain control over. And through the program, through the rehab treatments, like they have said, rehab works for those people who have become physically addicted, that don't have that mental allergy, that don't have that physical allergy and the mental obsession, to where they take a little bit, then they gotta take a whole lot. That was my problem. I take a little bit, I'm going to take the rest of it. That was my deal. And that's why rehab didn't work for me. They drive me up, they allowed me to get going, but I always started back up right after I got out if I didn't have a solution. And that's why I always came back to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why I always worked.
Thanks, Brett. One of the main things we try to hit on here is if you look down through the rest of this page, it talks about that there's the hopeless variety. And it says that I personally know scores of cases who are of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. It talks about in the foreword to the first edition also. We read about it on page 19 and 20. A hopeless variety, those in whom all other methods have failed. One of the best ways to discover if you're an alcoholic is through repetitive failure. So just trying to manage it, trying to quit, saying you're never going to drink again, and then, or picking up and saying, well, I'm only going to have this much, I'm not going to have any more, blah, blah, blah. And so there's one way in which sometimes it's called the low bottom drunk. That's the person who has gone above and beyond, made every attempt. When you say one in whom all other methods had failed, that person knows firsthand. One of the issues that we come across in Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill talked about it also, is that because of the fellowship and just the combined experience of the fellowship, we've been able to do something which wasn't really possible for the first 100. Like I said, Clarence Snyder was the youngest at the time. The rest of them were all in their 50s or higher. But when you look at someone like Clarence Snyder in his 30s, something we try to do as a fellowship today also is raise the bottom by our own shared experience. Saying look, you don't have to suffer for as long as I did if you're willing to acknowledge that these facts are true for you as it is for us. If you go to, let's just go to the next page. It's split up in the body and mind, and that's what it says in the middle of the page. It says, the physician who had a request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement, which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic, that will be the disease or the allergy, is quite as abnormal as his mind, that would be the mental obsession, or the thought that precedes the drink, and the body which receives the drink and then takes off with that first drink. So you have the mental obsession and the physical allergy. Mind is before, it's what leads to picking up when you know when every fact says it'd be insane to pick up based on your previous experience. And then you have the body, which is the disease aspect or the allergy aspect that says that, okay, now that the body has received the drink, let's just take off and never look back. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion to its soundness may of course mean little, but as this is the second to last paragraph on that same page. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that this explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. If you're new to the fellowship or you're talking with somebody who's new to the fellowship, this is the key point. The newcomer doesn't have to have a perfect understanding of what we mean by allergy and mental obsession. It's the responsibility of the member who's already within the fellowship, who's already worked the steps, to find the best way to put their own personal experience based on their own understanding with both unrecovered alcoholism, untreated alcoholism, and now being recovered from alcoholism and having that insight into the new way of life. Combining those two areas to then help, like I said, raise the bottom and put what the physical allergy is into a way that the newcomer can identify with, so that they can answer also that it explains many things for which they cannot otherwise account, and that it makes good sense to them as an explanation for what their problem is. Let's turn the page again. The top of Roman numeral 28, that first full paragraph. Can we get a reader?
We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
Thank you. Now, these chronic alcoholics, we have that highlighted, is a manifestation of an allergy. Allergy, we have that highlighted. That the phenomenon of craving, we have phenomenon of craving highlighted, never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol. We have never, both times, highlighted. Why do we have these highlighted? Very specific reason. For the chronic alcoholic, that means that's lifelong, can lead to death or life health diminishing. The alcoholic is subject to alcoholism that of the body. We call this the manifestation of an allergy or an abnormal reaction to alcohol that maybe over time our bodies have become hypersensitivity to alcohol, so that the makeup, the way that our body digests alcohol is separate and distinct from everybody else. So JP goes to the bar, I go to the bar, he sits down after a long day's hard work, he sits down, he has his beer, he watches the sports channel for a little bit, he finishes beer, he sits back, he finishes watching the game, he maybe eats a couple peanuts and some nachos, and then he goes home. His wife knows he'll be home at 9, he shows up at 9 every night, he's there on time. Goes to bed by 10, wakes up at 6. goes to work. Same thing next day. Maybe he doesn't.
What's he
maybe
doing
doesn't.
here then?
Well, he ain't. Then you have the other type of alcoholic. Now, I go there with the same intent that he went in there with. I'm going to have one beer. I sit down to have that beer. Sit down to watch the game. He likes the game. I like the game. He likes the beer. I like the beer. He likes having one. I like having one. Difference is he can have one and go home. I have one and I end up having 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10. This is what separates a normal drinker from an alcoholic. My intent going into it. I don't care if you've ever had just one. This says it never occurs in the average or temperate drinker. What I'm looking for in an alcoholic is, have you ever intended to have one and ended up having a lot more? Have you ever intended to take your medication as prescribed? Ended up having a lot more. Have you ever intended to do X and then doing Y or Z? So what we're looking for is intent going into it. Not like a frat boy who intends to have 30 beers and ends up having 35. Okay, whatever. What's the difference? I'm intending to moderate. I'm intending to control. I'm intending to just relax or whatever the reason going into it. The outcome is not what I intend. The outcome's the allergy. The outcome's the abnormal reaction. That's what makes me an alcoholic. That is the phenomenon of craving. A phenomenon means unexplainable. The phenomenon of craving means that the first one doesn't suffice and makes that thought of just having one completely disappear.
Yeah, a prime example from my college experience, you know. I always had afternoon parties, evening parties all the time because it allowed me to drink. But the one night that I chose, I was not going to drink that night. Everybody was going to drink, I was not. They begged me to play just one drinking game, have one beer. It's like, fine, just one beer. That's all I'm having, one beer. Had that one beer. 2 hours later, I was being thrown on the cop car hood, blowing a .29 BAC. Already blacked out after just the second beer.
Yeah.
Never planned on drinking more than just one. But the physical allergy kicked in. I was off to the races. Literally, I guess I was doing burnouts and donuts and stuff like that in the parking lot. I got arrested in my parking lot. You know, so I mean, that is physical allergy, hand in hand on how that goes.
Yeah, I got a similar experience where I was working at a job. I was dry. I wasn't working a program or anything. I was familiar with AA. I just wasn't in it. And I was working at a job site. I was making good money. I was working there for about 3 months. We were closing in on this job. The boss said we'd been doing a real, phenomenal. And so he said that we could go out and take an hour lunch. And so we go down to Eldorado's on our lunch break. We sit down. I was dry. Sit down. Everybody says you're going to order a beer. All right, I'll have a beer too. We ordered 3 pitchers. There was 12 of us. Everybody gets a glass. They drink that glass. Food comes up. We eat the food. Pour another one. Drink that. And then the pitchers are gone. And everybody's shooting the shit and talking and looking around the table having a good time. I can't stop staring at the pitchers that are empty.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we're buying more, right? And I'm looking at my clock and I'm like, if we're going to buy more, we need to buy more now. But I'm the only one thinking it, or at least nobody else is saying anything, so I didn't want to be weird. Everybody's having a good time. We carpool in 2 cars. Half the guys get in that car, the other half the guys get in my car. We drive back to the warehouse. Guys get out, go inside the building. My buddy who I grew up with, he's sitting right next to me. He did the same thing I did, man. He had his couple beers. He ate at the same restaurant, been working at the same place, same amount of time. And he's sitting there and he's finishing his cigarette and he tosses it out and he's like, all right, man, well, I'm going to head in. I'm like, all right, I'll be in right after you. He gets out, he goes inside, shuts the door. The second the door shuts, I throw it in reverse and I go and I get more. And in a moment, I threw away the work I was doing. I threw away the job entirely. I had no intention to drink that job away. I had no intention to go on another bender. I didn't have an intention to do any of that. I had the intent to have a beer with the guys to celebrate the fact that we've been doing a good job. Physical allergy takes me beyond what I intend and takes away everything that I worked to build up. That's the allergy. The answer to allergy is the abstinent part. If you turn the page, and we'll close on this. If you turn the page, XXX, bottom full paragraph says, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. The phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy. Remember, he says maybe, he uses the word allergy, but the definition remains the same. This phenomenon of craving, beyond my mental control, more than what I intend, sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. This coming from Dr. Silkworth, worked with over 40,000 alcoholics, right? Never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. That statement is just as true today as it was back then. And so if the solution is abstinence, how comes I keep going back to it? That's what we'll cover next week when we cover another session. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. Would please stand and join me in the Lord's Prayer.